Aaron Hernandez, the All-American murderer who fooled everyone. Aaron Hernandez was the embodiment of the American dream turned nightmare. A star tight end for the New England Patriots, he had signed a $40 million contract extension just a year before his life unraveled in the most spectacular and horrifying way possible. Born in Bristol, Connecticut, Hernandez was a gifted athlete from a young age. But when his demanding father Dennis died suddenly when Aaron was just 16, it sent the teenager into a spiral of anger and confusion that would define the rest of his short life. At the University of Florida, Hernandez was a standout player on 2 national championship teams, but even then, there were warning signs. He was involved in several violent incidents, including a bar fight that left a man with a ruptured eardrum, and there were persistent rumors about his involvement with drugs and gangs. Despite these red flags, the Patriots selected him in the 4th round of the 2010 draft, and he quickly became one of the most dynamic tight ends in the league. But behind the scenes, Hernandez was living a double life. He was struggling with his sexuality in a hyper-masculine environment, using drugs heavily, and becoming increasingly paranoid and violent. In 2013, this all came to a head when Odin Lloyd, a semi-pro football player who was dating the sister of Hernandez's fiancée, was found shot to death in an industrial park near Hernandez's home. The investigation revealed that Hernandez had become suspicious that Lloyd was talking to people about his business, and in his paranoid state, he decided that Lloyd had to be eliminated. The evidence against Hernandez was overwhelming. His cell phone records, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence all pointed to his guilt. During the trial, prosecutors painted a picture of a man who was living in constant fear, who saw enemies everywhere, and who was willing to kill to protect his secrets. In 2015, Hernandez was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the story didn't end there. Just days after his conviction, Hernandez was found dead in his prison cell, having taken his own life by hanging himself with a bedsheet. An autopsy of his brain revealed that he was suffering from a severe case of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma. The findings showed that Hernandez had stage 3 CTE, which is typically found in players who have been in the league for decades, not someone who was only 27 years old. Rae Carruth, the hitman and the unborn child who survived. Rae Carruth's story is one of the most heinous and cold-blooded crimes in the history of professional sports. A first-round draft pick by the Carolina Panthers in 1997, Carruth was a talented wide receiver with a promising career ahead of him. But beneath the surface, Carruth was a selfish and calculating individual who viewed relationships as transactions and saw children as financial burdens rather than blessings. In 1999, Carruth was involved in a relationship with Cherika Adams, a real estate agent who was 8 months pregnant with his child. When Adams began pressing Carruth for child support and a more committed relationship, he saw her not as the mother of his child, but as a threat to his lifestyle and his money. Rather than step up and take responsibility, Carruth made a decision that was so evil and calculated that it still shocks people to this day. He decided to have her killed. On the night of November 16, 1999, Carruth orchestrated a plan that was as cowardly as it was brutal. He convinced Adams to follow him in her car after they had been to see a movie together. As they drove through Charlotte, Carruth slowed his car to a crawl, trapping Adams behind him. At that moment, a car pulled up alongside Adams' vehicle, and the passenger opened fire, shooting her 4 times. As Adams lay dying in her car, she was able to call 911 and, in a moment of incredible courage and clarity, she told the dispatcher that Carruth had been involved in the shooting. Adams was rushed to the hospital, where she fought for her life for nearly a month before succumbing to her injuries. But in a miracle that defied all odds, doctors were able to deliver her baby, Chancellor Lee Adams, via an emergency C-section. Chancellor was born with cerebral palsy as a result of the trauma, but he was alive. The investigation quickly focused on Carruth, and the evidence against him was damning. Cell phone records showed that he had been in contact with the shooter in the hours leading up to the murder. When the charges were filed, Carruth went on the run, but he was eventually captured, found hiding in the trunk of a car in Tennessee. In 2001, Carruth was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and was sentenced to 18 to 24 years in prison. He was released in 2018, but the legacy of his crime lives on. Chancellor Lee Adams has been raised by his grandmother and continues to defy the odds, a living reminder of the horrific crime that his father committed. The NFL's concussion cover-up, a decade of denial and deception. For decades, the NFL actively denied and covered up the long-term neurological dangers of playing football, engaging in a systematic campaign of misinformation that put the health and safety of its players at risk. The league's own research committee, formed in 1994 and known as the Mild Traumatic Brain Injury Committee, was filled with doctors who had financial ties to the NFL and who consistently published flawed and misleading research that downplayed the link between concussions and permanent brain damage. The committee's chairman, Dr. Elliot Pellman, was a rheumatologist, not a neurologist, and he was the personal physician of NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue. The NFL's official position was that concussions were a minor injury and that there was no evidence of long-term consequences. This was in direct contradiction to a growing body of independent research that showed a clear link between repeated head trauma and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. The story of the NFL's concussion cover-up was brought to light by Dr. Bennett Omalu, a Nigerian-American forensic pathologist who discovered CTE in the brain of former Pittsburgh Steelers center Mike Webster. When Omalu published his findings, the NFL's response was swift and vicious. The league's doctors attacked Omalu's research, questioning his credentials and demanding that the journal retract his paper. But Omalu persisted, and he continued to find evidence of CTE in the brains of other former NFL players. The cover-up was eventually exposed in the series of articles by the New York Times and in the book and movie Concussion. The reporting revealed that the NFL had known about the dangers of concussions for years, but had chosen to hide the evidence to protect the league's image and profits. Internal NFL documents showed that the league's own research had found links between concussions and long-term brain damage, but these findings were never made public. The scandal led to a massive lawsuit by former players who accused the NFL of hiding the dangers of the game. In 2013, the league agreed to a settlement that could be worth more than $1 billion. The concussion cover-up remains one of the darkest chapters in the league's history, a time when the NFL put profits ahead of player health and safety. Bountygate, cash for cart-offs in the city that care forgot. In 2012, the NFL was rocked by a scandal that revealed a dark and violent underbelly to the sport, Bountygate. The scandal centered around the New Orleans Saints, who were found to have been running a bounty program from 2009 to 2011, a period that included their magical Super Bowl winning season. The program, run by defensive coordinator Gregg Williams, paid players bonuses for injuring opponents, turning the game into a blood sport where the goal was not just to win, but to maim. The bounties were for specific actions, with payouts for cart-offs, where a player was so injured that they had to be taken off the field on a cart, and knockouts, where a player was knocked unconscious. There were also bounties for bell ringers and for targeting specific players who were key to the opposing team's success. The scandal was exposed by a whistleblower, and the NFL launched a massive investigation. The findings were damning. The investigation confirmed the existence of the bounty program and revealed a culture of violence that was actively encouraged by the coaching staff. Williams was recorded giving speeches where he encouraged players to target specific body parts of opposing players, telling them to kill the head and the body will die, and to put a lick on certain players. The NFL came down hard on the Saints, handing out some of the most severe penalties in league history. Head coach Sean Payton was suspended for the entire 2012 season, becoming the first head coach in modern NFL history to be suspended for a full season. Williams was suspended indefinitely, and several players were also suspended. The team was fined $500,000 and lost 2 second-round draft picks. The scandal was a black eye for the league and raised serious questions about the culture of violence in football,
and the win-at-all-costs mentality that can lead to such a blatant disregard for players' safety.
Michael Vick, the brutal secret of bad news kennels. Michael Vick was one of the most electrifying and revolutionary players in NFL history. A quarterback with a cannon arm and world-class speed, he was the first overall pick in the 2001 draft and the face of the Atlanta Falcons franchise. But behind the scenes, Vick was living a double life that involved a world of violence and cruelty completely at odds with his public image. In 2007, Vick's carefully constructed facade came crashing down when he was implicated in a dogfighting ring being run out of a property he owned in Surry County, Virginia. The investigation into bad news kennels revealed a horrific world of animal cruelty that was shocking in its brutality and scope. Dogs were being bred, trained, and forced to fight to the death for entertainment and profit. Those that did not perform well were executed in brutal ways, including hanging, drowning, electrocution, and being slammed to the ground. According to court documents, Vick was not just a passive participant, but was personally involved in killing dogs that underperformed. The case sparked national outrage and exposed the underground world of dogfighting. Animal rights groups called for Vick to be banned from the NFL for life, and there were protests outside of Falcons games. Vick initially denied his involvement, but the evidence was overwhelming. In August 2007, facing a lengthy federal trial, Vick pleaded guilty to federal dogfighting charges. He was sentenced to 23 months in federal prison and was suspended indefinitely by the NFL. The scandal was a stunning fall from grace for a player who seemed to have it all. After his release from prison, Vick made a comeback with the Philadelphia Eagles and eventually rebuilt his career and image. He became an advocate for animal rights and worked with the Humane Society to educate young people about the dangers of dogfighting. But his name will forever be associated with one of the most notorious cases of animal cruelty in sports history. Darren Sharper, the Super Bowl champion and serial rapist. Darren Sharper was the epitome of success and respectability in professional football. A five-time Pro Bowl safety and key member of the New Orleans Saints Super Bowl winning team, he became a respected NFL Network analyst after retirement. Sharper was articulate, charismatic, and intelligent, seeming to be the perfect ambassador for the league. But behind this facade was a predator who used his status to lure and victimize women across multiple states. In 2014, Sharper's carefully constructed image came crashing down when he was arrested in Los Angeles and accused of rape. What followed was a multi-state investigation that revealed Sharper was a serial rapist who had drugged and sexually assaulted numerous women over several years. The investigation uncovered a calculated pattern of behavior. Sharper would meet women at bars or through social media, using his celebrity status to gain their trust. He would invite them to his hotel room or apartment and drug their drinks with substances like Ambien or Xanax. Once the women were incapacitated, he would sexually assault them, often taking photos or videos as trophies. The victims were often left with little memory of what had happened. As the investigation continued, more victims came forward, revealing charges spanning multiple states and involving at least 16 different victims. The case required coordination between law enforcement agencies across the country. In 2015, as part of a global plea deal, Sharper pleaded guilty or no contest to rape and sexual assault charges in 4 different states. He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. The case was a shocking story that exposed the dark reality that can hide behind the glamour of professional sports, serving as a reminder that fame and success do not make someone immune from the consequences of their actions.